You ask a question, and nobody answers right away. 2 seconds pass. Then 3. Then 5. And suddenly it feels like the longest moment of your life. Why does something as simple as silence feel so unbearable? There's no danger, no pain, nothing actually happening. And yet your whole body seems to demand that someone, anyone, say something right now. This happens everywhere. In meetings, on dates, in phone calls, even in text conversations. You send a message, you see those 3 little dots appear and disappear, and your mind immediately starts building a story. Are they angry? Did you say something wrong? The silence itself becomes the problem even before anyone says a word. Here's the first insight, and it explains almost everything else. Humans are wired to treat silence as a signal, not as an absence of one. When someone stops talking, your brain doesn't think nothing is happening. It thinks something is happening, and I don't know what it is yet. And uncertainty, more than almost anything else, makes people anxious. Think about a first date. The conversation is flowing, jokes are landing, and then suddenly there's a pause. Neither person says anything for a few seconds. Both people are enjoying the moment just fine, but at least one of them is probably panicking inside, wondering if the date is going badly. The silence hasn't changed anything about how the other person feels. It has only changed the story running through their own head. Researchers have actually measured this. In ordinary conversation, people tend to feel uncomfortable after a gap of only about 4 seconds. 4 seconds. That's barely enough time to take a breath, and yet it's enough to make most people jump in and fill the space, often with something they didn't even plan to say. Now here's where it gets interesting. This isn't universal. In some cultures, long pauses in conversation are completely normal, even respectful. They signal that you're thinking carefully about your answer instead of rushing to fill space with noise. But in cultures where fast-paced conversation is the norm, silence gets read as a red flag, a sign that something has gone wrong. That leads to the second insight. We don't just fear silence itself. We fear what we imagine other people are thinking during it. Picture a job interview. You answer a question, and the interview pauses before responding. In that gap, most candidates immediately assume the worst. They didn't like my answer. I said something stupid. In reality, the interview might just be writing notes, or thinking about the next question, or simply taking their time. The silence is neutral. The panic is something you added yourself. This is where most people get it completely backwards. They treat silence as evidence of a problem, when it's usually just empty space that their own mind rushes to fill with the worst possible explanation. Here's a short story that shows this perfectly. A woman once described a work call where she asked her boss a difficult question and then waited. The pause lasted maybe 6 seconds. She was convinced she had made a huge mistake and started apologizing before he even spoke. When he finally answered, he simply said, "Sorry, I was just thinking, that's actually a great point." 6 seconds. That was the entire gap between calm and full-blown panic in her head. This doesn't just happen face to face. It happens in texting too, maybe even worse. You send a message, and the reply doesn't come immediately. There's no tone of voice, no facial expression, nothing to read except silence on a screen. So your brain fills that empty space with guesses, and it almost never guesses something calm. Meanwhile, the other person might just be in the shower, or stuck in a meeting, or simply distracted for a moment. The gap says nothing about you at all, but it feels personal every single time. Now for the third insight, and this one is genuinely useful. Silence isn't just uncomfortable, it's often misunderstood as a weakness. But confident communicators actually use it on purpose. Public speakers, negotiators, even therapists are trained to sit in silence deliberately, because it gives the other person space to think, and it often makes their next words feel more powerful. Consider 2 people answering the exact same interview question. One rushes to fill every gap with words, talking faster and faster the moment things go quiet. The other pauses for a second or two before answering, calmly, like they have nothing to prove. Most listeners instinctively trust the second person more, even though both gave similar answers. The silence itself created an impression of confidence. So what can you actually do with this? Here's a simple practice. The next time a conversation goes quiet, resist the urge to fill it immediately. Count to 3 in your head before speaking again. In almost every case, you'll notice that the world doesn't fall apart. The other person is usually just thinking, just like you are. And if you're the one who tends to panic during pauses, try relabeling the silence in your mind. Instead of thinking something is wrong, try thinking we're both just pausing to think. That one small shift in the story you tell yourself can completely change how a quiet moment feels. Silence was never actually the problem. It's simply a blank space, and your mind has always been the one deciding whether to fill it with fear or with patience. Next time it happens, you get to choose which one wins.